And on another very serious matter, the IPCC report, which once again affirms the serious challenge that we face here in Australia because of the serious implications for Australia of what's happening globally, but also for our region. And just last week I met with the Pacific Island leaders again, and their advocacy on this has been consistent and strong, and something I've been very mindful of and listened to carefully. A serious challenge not just for Australia and advanced countries around the world, but all countries around the world. And the IPCC report affirms to me again my fundamental belief about how we must address this global challenge. We must take action, as we indeed are, and continue to take action, as we will continue to, in developed countries, in advanced economies. But we cannot ignore the fact that the developing world accounts for 2/3 of global emissions, and those emissions are rising. That is a stark fact. It is also a clear fact that China's emissions account for more than the OECD combined. Now, I make that point not to say that we should be imposing taxes on these countries. Quite the contrary. I totally understand and accept that the advanced world, the advanced economies of the world, have developed their economies over a long time, principally on the basis of fossil fuel industries. That is accepted. And I think it's a very fair argument that the developing world makes, which says, why should our economic futures be denied when advanced economies around the world have been able to go forward on that basis of their energy economies over a long period of time? I think that's a very fair point. But it doesn't change the calculus of climate change. The Australian approach is not to tax them or deny them the employment and the jobs and the industries that they should have, just as we should have them here in this country, but to enable them. World history teaches one thing: technology changes everything. That is the game changer. Governments, political leaders can pretend to these things, but I tell you what makes the difference: technology changes on the ground. And that is why our approach is technology, not taxes, to solving this problem. It's not enough for the technology to work with a tax in an advanced economy. That doesn't solve the problem, because it doesn't solve the problem in India. It doesn't solve it in Vietnam or in Indonesia or in China or in South Africa. It doesn't solve the problem. The emissions keep going up because of the choices that they will necessarily make. And so what's important is that we ensure that the technology breakthroughs that are necessary to transform the world over the next 10, 20 and 30 years are realised. When I was at the G7, we spoke about a number of issues. We spoke about this issue, but the day before we spoke about COVID. And we talked about how science and technology is helping us, in fact, enabling us to ultimately beat COVID-19. And we discussed how important it was to get vaccines right around the world in order to be true to the principle that unless the world was vaccinated, then we would still have serious issues when it comes to how this virus would continue to impact on the planet. It's no different when it comes to addressing the challenge of global climate change. Unless we can get the change in the developing countries of the world, then what we're seeing in these IPCC reports will occur. And so we need to take a different approach. We need to focus on the technological breakthroughs that are necessary to change the world and how we operate, and make sure that it's done right across the world, not just in advanced countries. It's not enough. Australia must and continue to do its part, and Australia has a strong track record of performance, and we intend for that to continue to increase in the years ahead And Angus will speak more to that about what's being achieved and what's being planned and how that is occurring. Australia is part of the solution. Our emissions have fallen by 20% since 2005. We are the only country, to our knowledge, that engages in the transparency of reporting our emissions reductions every sector, every gas, every quarter. No other country, to our knowledge, does that. They may do it on this one or that one, but not every sector, every gas and every quarter. Australia's record of reducing emissions stands above those who are claiming to achieve bigger things in the future but haven't achieved it to date. They haven't achieved it to the extent that Australia has. They can't claim the highest solar uptake on households in the world. They can't claim a rate of renewable uptake 8 times the global average per capita like Australia can. Australia is part of the solution. Australia is doing its part as part of the solution, and Australia will continue to do more as part of that solution because we understand what it means for our own country. Our commitments are backed up by plans, and we don't make them lightly. We consider them carefully. Australians deserve to know the implications and the costs and what the plans are. I did that before the last election. I said what our 2030 commitment was. I explained how I thought we would get there. I explained the costs to Australians, and Australians supported us. I'll do that again as we go into the commitments later this year. I'll do it again before the next election. I won't be signing a blank cheque on behalf of Australians to targets without plans. We will set out a clear plan, as we've been working to do. Australians deserve to know, and they will from us. Regional communities should not be forced to carry the national burden, and I won't let them. I will ensure that we have a plan that addresses the need for jobs and industries that can be supported by new energy technologies, both now and into the future. I will not be asking people in the regions of this country to carry the burden for the country alone. I'll be ensuring that we have a plan that addresses their critical needs, that addresses their anxieties and seeks to bring the whole country with us on this very important task that we have together. So we have an Australian way to deal with this challenge, and it's being put into place. I'll tell you what the Australian way isn't. The Australian way is not what we have seen with the vandalism in our capital today. I don't associate in any way, shape or form that foolishness with the good-hearted nature of Australians who care deeply about this issue, as I do, and my government does. I don't associate them with this. They have no part with that foolishness today, any more than we've seen in other selfish protests around this country. Australians care deeply about this issue, and so does our government. Action will be taken against those who have committed those offences in our capital today, as they should, and I think Australians who, regardless of what their position on this issue, would agree with that. That is not the way we go forward. There is a woman that I wave to almost every morning when I come into this building, as I drive up. And there's often people, as you all know, who will be putting their point across peacefully and calmly down there on the ramp coming up into Parliament House. She's there almost every morning, and she makes this point every day, and she gives me a wave and she gives me a smile. I tell you what, I'm listening to her. I'm listening to Australians about this issue. And more than that, we're taking action that I think will actually make the difference. We need the technological changes that will transform the global energy economy of the world. It's not good enough for it just happen to Australia and the United States and in Europe. It must happen in these other countries, and they must have prosperity. Otherwise, we will not fix this.